Hello, I'm Amy Walter, and this is the Washington Week Extra. The Washington Post reported this week that the Trump Foundation admitted it broke some IRS rules when it used the charity's money to pay some personal expenses of family and friends. So, Mateo, what can you tell us about the latest twists and turns in the Trump Foundation story?
Yes, this has been a story that my colleague David Fahrenthold has been dogging over the course of the last year. And what happened this week was that the Trump Foundation filed their latest tax return and showed that they had actually checked off a box saying that they had engaged in self-dealing, which means that there was basically foundation resources that went to benefit someone, a private party related to the foundation, both in the last tax year and previous tax years. We don't know what instances they were referring to, or they might have been referring to instances that David uncovered, which included the purchase of a Donald Trump portrait with foundation money and a settlement of lawsuits with foundation money. They did not specify that, but these are the kind of violations that could trigger fines and requests for repayment of those funds.
Can the IRS follow up on this? He's now the president-elect, soon will be the president. Are there rules about what the IRS can do to a sitting president if it's about tax law?
He's still subject to tax law as the president, and it looks like from the form that they are basically acknowledging this and preparing either to pay a fine or saying that they already have paid one. There's another form that would indicate whether they actually had paid that money that wasn't uploaded yet. So it remains to be seen, but there will be it looks like some resolution to that, and it really comes, I think, as a vindication of the reporting David was doing, which the Trump campaign for the most part declined to comment on or said that they were operating within the bounds of the law.
Right. Well, we're also going to move to the fact that while the election feels over, it is over. There's one place in America where it's still not over, and that's in North Carolina. There's a governor's race there where the race still remains undecided. This is Republican Governor Pat McCrory, who's currently trailing the Attorney General Roy Cooper, the Democrat there. And Josh, this has gotten a little bit contentious.
Nothing ever ends this election cycle. It just goes on and on and on. Well, so Cooper is ahead by just under 10,000 votes, which in itself is a disappointment for Democrats, frankly, because McCrory had signed a very controversial transgendered bathroom bill and seemed to be ahead, quite a ways ahead going into the fall. A lot of Democrats thought that this would really be a victory for LGBT Americans, would ratify the idea that you can't push these things. And instead of being a resounding victory, we are now, it looks like, headed to a recount. But the interesting thing about the situation as it stands now is that McCrory, the possibly outgoing governor, is crying voter fraud and contesting the validity of what, in any case, is a very close election. And does this suggest, given what McCrory is doing, what we heard during the course of the campaign, now we're even hearing from liberals saying that the election might have been stolen or rigged in some of these very close states against who voted for Trump, that this is going to be the new normal, that anytime you lose, you're going to say voter fraud or rigged? You know, it feels like it is. I mean, we're a couple weeks into the new Trump administration, and American political norms are being knocked down left and right, and not just by Donald Trump. I think the fact that McCrory is kind of coming out and saying this preemptively and scrambling things and upsetting people while also rallying, Republicans behind him means that the idea of kind of honorably conceding that you've been defeated may be a figment of the past. Well, speaking about the past, Christine, I want to talk to you a little bit about the after the 2012 election, Republicans had this so-called autopsy of their defeat. Are we going to see a Democratic autopsy? I mean, we now have Democrats who've lost seats since Obama's been president in the legislature. I think they've lost something like 900 seats at the state legislative level. Yeah. They've lost like 11 Senate seats. They're at their lowest numbers in the House since the 1920s. So are Democrats going to have to come back and do that same sort of take a really deep look at ourselves, go through everything to figure out what to do next?
I think they are going through that reckoning, and these questions over identity politics and how important a part that should be is a factor of that. They did gain some seats in both the House and Senate this election, so they are creeping up a little bit. And there is optimism that they can perform well in the 2018 midterms because Republicans have full control of Congress
Right.
and the White House, and the expectations are going to be sky high. So Democrats are hoping to take advantage of that and any missteps that President Trump might take. But they are facing these structural disadvantages in the way House districts are drawn, and their losses at the state House level, as you mentioned, are so significant that's going to take a really long time to come back.
Yeah, and that this has happened over the course of Obama's.
Right.
He's done very well.
Right.
But everybody else in his party has failed. So what does that say about the Democratic Party going forward? Yeah.
I think what's tricky right now is that they haven't had control of Congress, so they haven't been able to advance their own agenda.
Yep.
It's a little bit tougher for them to say which policies have and haven't been working.
Right. And finally, we want to talk about sort of the big existential question for you all. Candidate Donald Trump changed the way presidential elections were covered, and it looks like he may have the same effect on the way media covers the president. And Ashley, you spent a lot of time on the campaign trail trying to cover a very different kind of candidate than you did in the previous election. What is it going to look like to cover a President Donald Trump, especially if he still uses this to send out tweets and he has on-the-record meetings with the New York Times but has yet to hold a press conference?
I think that's a question that the truth is we're all trying to figure out, and we've been trying to figure that out for some time. I remember when I was covering Donald Trump on the campaign trail and he first banned the Washington Post. I sort of had this thought of what happens if he becomes president and how would we handle this? And my first thought was, oh, well, of course the White House Correspondents Association would write a letter and tell Donald Trump it's not acceptable. And we are now at the point in the transition where there have been one or two strongly worded letters. And what you sort of realize is a lot of these things exist, based on basically their core niceties, societal,
or the past norms,
societal niceties, and so nothing says that the president has to have a protective pool. Nothing says he has to allow reporters into the briefing room or even hold briefings. And I think we are all hopeful that he will respect past precedent, but we really don't have any sense.
Well, in talking to people around Trump, too, they say, and this will not come as a newsflash, he is enamored by the power of social media and his ability to reach a gigantic audience and essentially go over the heads of the mainstream media, as we're called. You saw that with his YouTube announcing his policy priorities. And I was talking to a Trump advisor the other day. He said, we're up to, 25 million, 15 million Twitter followers he has. But once he becomes president, he inherits the president's Twitter followers. And so there will be this sort of combining of Twitter accounts.
You mean the current president? So
yes.
he gets Obama's
at
POTUS.
The POTUS Twitter handle gets passed along to the next president. So Trump will soon be doubly powerful on social media. So everybody prepare yourselves.
That should be an interesting group of people who thought Thanksgiving was awkward. Imagine the Twitter awkwardness going there. And does it matter, though, if he has a protective pool or not? To a lot of Americans, the idea about following the president out to dinner seems sort of anachronistic.
Sure. What's interesting is if you look at it at its core, it feels a little navel-gazy, right? Why does the press need to know if he ordered a steak medium rare at the 21 Club, which is where he went when he ditched the press without his protective pool? But there's a reason for that precedent, which is, the press needs to know where the president is if his life is in danger. I mean, we think about what happened with 9/11. The reason there were reporters on that plane and able to provide that historical record was because they were there with him for what seemed like a very mundane day of a tiny policy rollout in a Florida school. And you don't want a president who is sneaking off and meeting with people. I mean, in theory, the press actually does fulfill a very important responsibility of the fourth estate. And, would Donald Trump meet with, Putin without the press? There's just an accountability mechanism that is more than simply we want to be at the restaurant when he's ordering chicken or steak.
Right. All right. Well, thank you guys for sticking around and talking with us, and thanks everybody for watching. I'm Amy Walter. Check back soon for the next edition of the Washington Week Extra.